Just flying down through there, and I don't know if y'all have ever seen a river like this, but they have what are called sweepers that come out from the bank. These are trees sticking out from the bank that have not dislodged themselves at this point, and they call them sweepers for a reason. They sweep people off their rafts. And idiots who are crazy enough to be out there. And there were a lot of logs. If you've watched the Yukon Men, if y'all watched that show, they had one on the other night about them collecting logs. I get feelings every time I watch that show. Oh, I'm telling you. And off we went down the river, and we were just flying down through there, and all of a sudden we got to this place, and it didn't get funny anymore. Because there was a sweeper sitting out from the bank, jutting out from the bank. It hit that old raft that we had, built by an engineering student that didn't know squat what he was doing. It spun it around, and we were all laughing. Me with my hole in my pants. We even strapped some ropes on there. I don't know what the ropes were doing on there. I think to keep us from falling off. I never did quite figure out what the maze of ropes was all about. But off we went, and we were coming to a second sweeper coming out from the bank. It hit the raft, and that raft, which weighed a lot with those oil barrels, shot straight up in the air. We went down into these frigid waters with silt, and it crashed down on top of us. Well, at this point, I'm under there for a long time. I was there longer than anyone. The story goes, they tell me later, that they had come up, their heads bobbed up, and they climbed on top of the overturned raft and realized that I was not there. I was underneath fighting for my life. I had my arms and legs tied in those ropes. And I got to the point, and I was so cold, and I started to go out. I started to pass out. And I remember just seeing a bright light, and I felt the Lord's presence. And I said to Jesus, I said, Lord, I'm so sorry to die this way. What a pitiful way to have to die. And I felt the Lord say, you're not dead yet, son. You're not dead yet. My brother tells me that my head popped up on the other end of the raft. I was still unconscious. And my brother reached out and caught me and pulled me onto the overturned raft. Well, when I came to, and I was conscious at this point, that overturned raft with the oil barrel sticking up in the air was just barreling down this river. And right in front of us, about 50 yards, was a log jam. Y'all know what a log jam is? Hundreds of logs come into one place, and the water literally sucks right under those logs. And you could hear the sucking of that river going under those logs. And we said, we're going to die. I said, well, I've already died once. I've already been dead under the raft. They're yelling, we're going to die. You know, these are brave men. We're going to die. This guy from Vietnam. We're going to die. Well, there was this one single sweeper sticking out before we hit the log jam. And my brother said, we're going to reach out. I'm going to grab that, jump for it, and you guys jump for me, and we'll form a chain, a line. And they said, okay, a chain. We did just that. My brother caught the limb, I caught him, and we formed a line. We were doing this in the river. And we inched up that branch of that tree, like this. And then when each one of us would get to the limb, we would inch, hoping it didn't break off and just flow on down the river. We got up to the bank, and it was straight up and down, 5 feet straight up and down. And we started clawing into the rocks and into the dirt until our fingers were bleeding. When we got to the top of that bank, I was in complete hypothermic shock. I don't know if anybody in here ever had hypothermia? It made every part of my body do this. And I'm not exaggerating. Every single part of my body was doing that. Every part of it. I've never experienced anything like that. My brother was scared. He thought, well, I didn't lose him out there, I'm going to lose him here from hypothermia. And I was laying up on the bank, shaking like that all over, and a rescuer came by, a man in a boat, and my life was saved at that moment by a thermos of coffee. That's why I love coffee. I love coffee. He stopped and he administered that coffee to me just slowly until my body temperature started to come down. I was literally saved by a thermos of coffee. When we got to that point, now, we were horrified because at this point, the race had caught up with us. Remember? It had finally started. And we couldn't warn them in time. To our horror, we watched the next raft come and hit the log jam, and it sucked it under and killed 2 of them instantly. They never found their bodies. And we watched that. And we're standing on the bank, and this guy finally came back in his boat after he had the coffee, and he said, "Fellas, I don't have time. You can see so much is happening right now. But I'm going to take you back up the river to this cabin where some other people have been rescued, and you can swap stories with them." I thought, boy, that's great. Just what I want to do is swap stories. I'm half dead. I'm cold. He took us back upriver. Now, I'm telling you the truth. This really happened. We got out. We went up this pathway to this cabin, and we knocked on the door, and this drunk opened the door and said, "What do you want?" Well, we crashed down the river. He said, "So did we, blankety blank blank. Why don't you blankety blank come in here, and we'll have some liquor together, and we'll all get drunk together." I said the wrong thing. I said, "We don't want your stinking alcohol." About that time, the guns came out. They started shooting at us. And the bullets were flying everywhere. 4 guys doing this. And my brother yelling, "You idiot! Why did you ever open your mouth?" We're running, limbs are dropping, bullets are flying. You say, this really happened? It really happened. We ran till we got down to the riverbank. And at the riverbank, we crawled behind the bank, and you could hear the bullets hitting the sand above us. Now, here's what happened. This is a true story. We had a man in our church named John Schilling. John has discovered his own gold mine in Alaska. He lives in Houston, Missouri, part of the year, lives in Alaska the rest. He owns his own gold mine. John was sitting at home listening to this stuff on his radio. And he heard about these crazy people cracking up and dying and being sucked under logs. And he said, "The Baker boys are out there. I know they're there." And he said he felt the Lord telling him, "Get in your boat now and go. I'll show you where they're at." So he had started out in his racing riverboat. He had a flat bottom racing riverboat with 200 horse Mercs on it. He won the Yukon 800 race that year. That went all the way to the Yukon River. It's 800 miles. And he started out in his boat. And he said he just kept praying the whole time. And he said just as he got to the climax of prayer, he looked over there and he saw on the riverbank us hiding behind the bank with bullets hitting the ground above us. And I'll never forget, it's the sweetest sight I ever saw. I looked up and there was John Schilling. He pulled up in that riverboat. I just went and fell in it. And all the way home, I'm laying in that riverboat thinking, "Oh, dear Lord, thank you for saving me." On this same day, I almost drowned. I had my pants on fire. I had severe hypothermia and shock. And I was shot at, and I lived to tell it. You know, I realized that our God is a rescuing God. And you know, it was that winter we were in our cabin, and we were up there. My brother called me. He was in a trailer house, and it was 30 below zero. He had 4 foot of snow on his trailer. He said, "Mark, would you come over here and shovel off my trailer so that it won't cave in? Because there's 4 foot of snow on top of it." "I'm sick." He was sick. Oh, yeah. So I went over there and I shoveled off my brother's trailer. I was frozen to death. He said, "Come on inside. Billy Graham's on." Y'all like Billy Graham? Yes. I got down off that trailer feeling raw and frozen again. Thanks to my brother one more time. I went into the trailer and he and I sat down and we watched Billy Graham. And that night at 30 below zero in that trailer with 4 foot of snow on it, we heard Billy preach a sermon that changed our lives. And this was after the Raft Race. He preached this sermon. He preached that we should do God's will at any cost. At any cost. And my brother and I that night were called to preach the gospel. Both of us. He's been preaching all these years. He's been in the same church for 38 years now. And I've been preaching as well since I was 16 years old. You know, the Lord moves in mysterious ways. But God is in the business of rescuing people. As Jesus said in that passage, why? That we might be saved. He knows that we're in trouble. You may be here tonight and you need rescue. You know, that was a humiliating experience for me, but what a relief it was to have somebody come to me that God had spoken to and to pull me out of certain death. And to give me an opportunity to live my life serving Jesus and loving people and having the great opportunities that God has given to me. And I want to encourage you tonight to come